Welcome back to EPCM Project Academy and our EPCM Insights. Today, we're diving deep into a skill that, well, it might seem basic on the surface, but it really can make or break your success as a project professional. We're talking about writing effective memos. And we're not talking about casual emails or quick messages, but those carefully structured, concise documents, the ones that can actually influence decisions that have real impact on a project's cost, schedule, and ultimately its success.
Yeah, that's right. A well-crafted memo, it's not just about conveying information, It's about navigating those really complex situations that come up, often when you don't have all the data, and being able to present your analysis and recommendations in a way that compels action. Makes people want to do something about it.
Okay, so to guide us through this deep dive, we have three really insightful documents. These were originally created to help people preparing for certification exams like the CCP, but the insights they offer are pure gold for anyone working on real-world projects. Would you agree?
Absolutely, because the principles of clear communication, problem solving, and persuasive writing, those are universal, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're trying to convince a project manager to adopt a specific solution or advocating for a change order to a client. Being able to write a powerful memo, that's a game changer.
Okay, so let's unpack this. First things first. Why are memos so important? In this age of instant messaging and video calls, you might wonder if these more formal documents are still relevant. What do you think?
It's a great question, and it's one that our source material addresses head on. See, memos are still crucial, especially in project management, because they provide the structured, well-reasoned, and documented record of critical project issues, and the analysis, and of course, the recommendations. Think about it this way. Decisions on projects, those often have significant financial and operational implications, right? So a memo creates a clear audit trail. It makes sure everybody's on the same page and that decisions are made transparently and that there's accountability.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about communication. It's about creating a formal record that can be referenced throughout the entire project lifecycle. It's like building a solid foundation for decision-making. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Precisely. Now, speaking of foundations, let's move on to the anatomy of a powerful memo. One of our documents is called Resumen del formato y flujo sugerido para redacción del Memo Question, and it outlines a very specific structure, a 5-paragraph framework that can really help you build a compelling case.
5 paragraphs. Okay, that sounds almost too simple. So what's the magic behind this structure? What makes it so effective?
Well, the beauty is in its simplicity and its clarity, really. Each paragraph serves a very distinct purpose, guiding the reader through your reasoning in a logical and persuasive way. It's kind of like leading them by the hand. So let's break it down. First, we have the header.
Right. So this is what we set the stage, right? Making sure we have all the essentials, the to, the from, date, subject, project name, and even our ACE ID number if it's applicable. It's all about making that first impression, showing that we're organized and professional.
Exactly. It's like, if you think about it, it's like the handshake before a business meeting. You want to convey that sense of professionalism and attention to detail right from the start.
Absolutely. Okay. Now on to the meatier part. The 5 paragraphs themselves. The first paragraph, as our document calls it, is setting the stage. Why is this initial paragraph so crucial? What are we trying to accomplish here?
Think of it like the movie trailer for your memo, right? You got to grab the reader's attention immediately, highlight the issue at hand and why it matters. Is it a cost overrun? Is it a scheduled delay? Or is it some critical risk that needs to be addressed? You need to establish the context, and you need to make it clear why this memo demands their attention right now.
Got it. So it's about creating that sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Showing the reader why they should care about what you're about to tell them. Hook them, right?
Exactly. Now, once you've set the stage, you move on to exploring solutions in the second paragraph. This is where you present all the different options that are available to address the problem.
Okay. And our source material emphasizes that you should only add your own solutions if absolutely necessary. Now, why is that? Why not always brainstorm and bring fresh ideas to the table?
It's an interesting point, and it likely reflects the reality of many project situations, especially those that are, encountered in certification exams. Sometimes you're just presented with a predefined set of options. Maybe it's due to contractual limitations, budget constraints, or just the nature of the problem itself, right?
All right.
Your task is to analyze the given solutions. It's not necessarily to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, so it's about showcasing your ability to critically evaluate those existing options, understanding their pros and cons, and then selecting the most viable one based on the information that you have available.
Precisely. because that demonstrates your analytical skills and your ability to make sound judgments within those constraints, which is a highly valuable skill in project management.
For sure. Okay, so we've set the stage, we've explored the options. Now it's time to, roll up our sleeves and really dive into the data. Paragraph 3 is all about the data deep dive. This is where the real analysis happens.
This is where you put your project controls expertise to work. You're examining the impact of each potential solution on the project's cost, schedule, and quality. And you're backing up your analysis with solid evidence. You got to have the receipts.
Yeah, and this is where things can get really tricky, right? I mean, what happens when we're dealing with incomplete or conflicting information? Our source material really emphasizes that this is a common challenge and one that often is tested in those certification exams.
It's a challenge that we face all the time in the real world, too. You rarely ever have perfect information when you're making project decisions. So the key is to acknowledge the limitations of the data up front. Be transparent about any assumptions that you're making. And just present your analysis in a way that shows how you arrived at your conclusions, even with that imperfect information.
So it's about, like you said, being honest about those data gaps,
Right.
explaining how you're working around them, and justifying your recommendations based on the best available information.
Yeah.
Not trying to hide anything or pretend like we have all the answers when we don't.
Exactly. It's about building that trust and credibility with the person who's reading it. They need to see that you've considered all the angles, weighed the uncertainties, and arrived at a recommendation that's well-reasoned, even despite the challenges.
Okay. So we've set the stage, explored the solutions, analyzed all that data, and now it's time to make our case. Paragraph 4 is the recommendation. This is where we lay it all out.
Yep. This is where you confidently present your chosen solution. You want to state it clearly and concisely, highlight both the advantages and disadvantages, because even the best solution is going to have trade-offs, right?
Of course. So it's not just about saying this is the best option, but explaining why, acknowledging any potential drawbacks, and just making a compelling argument for why your chosen solution outweighs all those other alternatives.
Precisely. You need to anticipate potential objections, and you need to address those head-on. Think of it like presenting your case to a jury. You got to persuade them with logic, with evidence, and with a clear understanding of the risks and benefits involved.
Got it. Okay, final paragraph. The handoff. What's the purpose of this concluding paragraph? What are we doing here?
Think of it as passing the baton to the decision maker. Usually that's going to be the project manager. You're summarizing your recommendation, you're outlining the next steps, and you're ensuring a smooth transition from that analysis phase to action, from thinking to doing.
Okay, so we're not just throwing a recommendation over the fence and walking away. We're providing that context, offering our continued support, and making sure that the project manager has all the information they need to make an informed decision and to actually implement that solution effectively. We're setting them up for success.
Exactly. It's about collaboration, teamwork, making sure that your analysis translates into real-world action that benefits the project. It's all connected.
Welcome back to our deep dive into memo mastery. If you remember, in part 1, we really broke down the why behind memos, and we went over that fundamental structure, that 5-paragraph framework that guides the reader through a clear and compelling argument, right?
Right.
So now let's explore those nuances that can really, take your memo writing to the next level. What do you think?
It's about going beyond just conveying information. It's about using your memos to actually influence decisions and, drive those positive outcomes on your projects, make things better.
Exactly. And one of the biggest challenges that's highlighted in our source material, preguntas frecuentes sobre la redacción del Memo Question en el examen de certificación, is dealing with incomplete or conflicting information. Now, this can be tricky, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it trips up even those seasoned project professionals, those who've been doing this for a while. So how do you approach this, especially when you're tasked with, making those sound recommendations, even when the data is not perfect?
Well, it's something we face all the time in the real world, right? I mean, rarely do we have all the pieces of the puzzle neatly laid out for us. So the key is to acknowledge those limitations of the data up front. Don't try to, hide those inconsistencies or pretend that you have all the answers when you don't. Address the gaps head on, right in your memo.
So transparency is key, right?
Absolutely. Explain those discrepancies that you found, outline any assumptions that you're making, and just be upfront about the potential impact, how those limitations could affect your analysis and recommendations.
So it's about building trust with whoever's reading it, right? Showing them that you're not afraid to acknowledge those uncertainties, but you're still capable of making a well-reasoned judgment.
Yeah.
based on the best information that's available at the time.
Exactly. And, when you come across conflicting information, that's when it's even more important to present, both sides of the argument, lay out the potential risks and benefits of each perspective, and then, based on the evidence that you do have, explain why you're leaning one way or the other.
So it's like you're playing devil's advocate with yourself a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Exploring those possibilities and then arriving at that recommendation.
Exactly.
Okay. So this meticulous approach, all this analysis that we're talking about, this goes hand in hand with another really important aspect of memo writing, and that's structure and flow. Now, our source material highlights this quite a bit, but why is it so important? I mean, we already have that 5-paragraph framework. Isn't that enough to ensure a logical flow?
Well, the 5-paragraph structure, that provides that solid foundation, It's like having the blueprint for a house. But you still need to carefully consider the layout of each room, the flow between spaces, the overall user experience. And in a memo, that translates to the arrangement of your arguments, those smooth transitions between paragraphs, and just the overall readability of the document. I mean, a well-structured memo that just guides the reader effortlessly through your analysis, makes it easy to follow that line of reasoning, and it ultimately leads them to your conclusion.
Right. So it's like you're laying out a clear path through a dense forest. You want your reader to arrive at that destination without getting lost along the way.
Exactly. And one technique that can really help, enhance the flow of your memo is using those transitional words and phrases. They're like bridges that connect your ideas, guiding the reader from one point to the next. Words like, however, furthermore, on the other hand, in addition, they can make a big difference.
Yeah, those are like the signposts, right? They keep the reader on track, make sure they don't miss any of those crucial turns as they're going through your argument.
That's right.
Now, let's talk about another nuance, something that can sometimes trip people up. That's language and tone. We know we need to be professional, but what does that actually look like? In the context of writing a memo, how do we strike that balance?
Well, it's about finding that sweet spot, right? Between formality and clarity. You want to convey your expertise, your professionalism, but you don't want to alienate your reader, with too much technical jargon or sentences that are just too complex. Remember, the goal here is to communicate your ideas effectively, not to impress people with your vocabulary.
Right. So it's about being concise, to the point, using language that everyone can understand, regardless of their background.
Exactly.
But does the tone always have to be strictly formal? I mean, can we ever inject a bit of personality into our writing, or is it a no-no?
Well, it's a delicate balance, right? And the appropriate tone, that's going to depend on who you're writing to and the context of the memo. A memo to a colleague might be a little more conversational, than one that's going to a senior executive or a client. But regardless of the audience, those core principles of respect, professionalism, and objectivity, those should always guide your writing.
So it's okay to be assertive, but not aggressive.
Right.
We can express our opinions, advocate for our recommendations, but always do it in a way that, fosters collaboration and respect, even when we might be disagreeing with a certain viewpoint.
Exactly. It's about presenting your analysis and those recommendations in a way that invites constructive dialogue. And ultimately, it's about getting the best outcome for the project. That's what we all want, right?
Absolutely. Now, these documents that we've been talking about, they give some really good examples of how to put all these nuances into practice. Are there any that come to mind for you? Any that really stand out?
One that I always think about is the emphasis on quantifying the impact of each solution. It's not enough to just say, this option will save us money, right?
Right.
You have to back it up with data, with examples. You might say something like, implementing solution A that's projected to reduce costs by 15% based on what we've seen on similar projects and, the current market trends for materials. Or choosing vendor B over vendor C, that could potentially speed up the schedule by a couple weeks based on their track record of on-time delivery, solid data.
So it's about adding that weight to our recommendations by using concrete numbers, evidence-based analysis, and those real-world examples, the stuff that resonates with people. It's about showing, not just telling.
Exactly. It takes your memo from just a bunch of opinions to a well-supported, data-driven analysis. It's something that gets people's attention and, builds confidence in your recommendations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so we've explored some of those key nuances of memo writing. Dealing with that incomplete information, mastering the structure and flow, finding the right language, the right tone. But how does this all come together for our listeners? What are some of the actionable takeaways, something they can apply to their own writing, whether they're getting ready for a certification exam or just aiming to improve their communication skills on the job.
Well, one of the most important takeaways is that memo writing, it's a skill. It can be learned and improved. It's not something that, some people are just born with and others aren't. By understanding these principles, the ones we're talking about today, and practicing those techniques, anyone can write memos that are clear, concise, and persuasive. Memos that actually make a difference on their projects.
So it's about embracing that 5-paragraph structure as a starting point, but then going beyond the template, really honing your analytical skills, your persuasive writing abilities, and your understanding of who you're writing for.
Exactly. And remember, even if you're already a good writer, you can always get better. Don't be afraid to experiment, get feedback from colleagues, and just continuously refine your approach.
It's about seeing each memo as a chance to learn and grow,
Right.
to get better at what you do and become a more effective communicator overall.
Absolutely. Because a well-crafted memo, not only can it impact the outcome of a project, but it can also really enhance your reputation as a professional. You're seen as someone who's thoughtful, who can articulate their ideas well, and someone who's focused on results. It's a skill that will be valuable throughout your whole career.
It's a good investment.
It is.
Welcome back to EPCM Project Academy and our EPCM Insights. We've spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive really dissecting the art of writing those impactful memos, from that 5-paragraph structure all the way to the subtle nuances of language and tone. But now let's bring it all home for you, our listeners. Whether you're working towards a certification like the CCP or just looking to, sharpen those communication skills in the real world, how can you actually take these insights and translate them into results? Make them work for you.
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? It's one thing to understand the theory and everything, but how do we actually put these principles into practice? How do we become memo masters, so to speak?
Exactly. So let's talk about, those actionable takeaways. What are the key things that our listeners should be focusing on as they're working on their memo writing craft?
Well, first and foremost, you got to remember every memo, it's an opportunity to tell a story. You're not just presenting, data and figures. You're building a narrative that leads the reader to a specific conclusion. So embrace that 5-paragraph structure we talked about. Use that as your roadmap. It makes sure that you hit all the essential points, from setting the stage to making a clear recommendation and then, outlining the next steps, what needs to happen next.
It's like having that blueprint for success.
Yeah.
Right? Those key elements that you need to include,
Yeah.
but you still have that freedom to, tailor the details to fit your specific project and who you're writing to.
Exactly. And as you craft that narrative, you always want to remember the power of clarity. Use concise language. Avoid all that jargon that might confuse the reader. Just focus on getting your message across. Straightforward, understandable way. Think about it like this. If you had to explain your recommendation to someone, like in an elevator pitch, really quick, could you do it in a way that was clear, concise, compelling? That's the level of clarity that we're aiming for in our memos.
So it's about, stripping away the fluff and getting right to the heart of the matter. But being clear doesn't mean that we oversimplify, right? I mean, we still need to show that we're experts and provide that solid analysis.
Absolutely. And this is where good data analysis comes in. Even if you're dealing with incomplete or conflicting information, which, happens all the time in project management, present your findings in a way that shows you've really done your homework. Explain your assumptions, outline your methodology, and then justify those recommendations with hard evidence. Quantify whenever possible. Don't just say, this option is more cost-effective. Show them the numbers. Back up your statements with data, maybe from similar projects, historical trends, industry benchmarks, anything that really adds weight to your analysis and, builds trust with your reader.
So it's not just about having an opinion. It's about supporting it with data, with a real argument that people can't just dismiss. And all of this, of course, needs to be presented professionally and respectfully, no matter who we're writing to.
That's right. The tone, that's so important. Remember, a memo is a reflection of you as a professional. You always want to keep it courteous and respectful, even if you're disagreeing with someone. The focus should be on collaboration and finding the best solution for the project, not winning an argument or proving someone wrong.
So it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. And I think that's a really valuable takeaway for our listeners. Mastering this whole memo writing thing, it's not just about following some rigid formula. It's really about developing the right mindset. It's about approaching each memo as a chance to get better at critical thinking, at persuasive writing, and understanding your audience.
Couldn't agree more. It's a craft,
Yeah.
something you're always refining and getting better at. And the great thing is, the skills you develop in this process, they transfer over to so many other areas of your career. Whether you're writing a project proposal or presenting at a meeting, even just communicating with colleagues, being able to explain your ideas clearly and concisely and in a way that persuades people, that's invaluable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into memo mastery, just remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Embrace the process, be open to feedback, and don't ever stop learning. Because when you master the art of the memo, you're not just writing documents, you're actually influencing decisions, you're shaping outcomes, and ultimately making a real difference on your projects and in your career.
And that's what we all want, right? To make a positive impact.
That's our deep dive into crafting impactful memos. Remember, clear communication is your superpower in this project world.
Absolutely. A well-written memo can make all the difference.
We hope you found this insightful. If you did, don't forget to share and subscribe to EPCM Insights for more project management wisdom. Until next time.